7 levels down, they said. 7 levels before you reach the core. Nobody went that deep after 92 when something broke inside. The walls still echo with that fracture, a sound like shattered glass gliding backwards through water. Level 1, familiar territory. Graffiti marks the wall like scattered thoughts, each tag bleeding into the next like fever dreams. Shadows fall exactly where expected, but they feel heavier here, as if gravity pulls harder on darkness. The air tastes like pennies and old memories, like blood from a bitten tongue during a nightmare. Level 2, darker now. Rust flakes float like copper snow, dancing in my beam before sticking to skin, leaving stains shaped like forgotten fingerprints. Each flake burns cold on contact, seeping beneath the surface. My breath draws them deeper, and they taste like childhood fears crystallized. Level 3. The rust grows thicker, coating surfaces in patterns, almost like faces. I recognize some, though I shouldn't. They watch with eyes that followed me here from childhood, from places I thought I'd locked away. When I turn my head, they shift, mouths opening in silent screams that feel like my own. Level 4. The air congeals, thick as oil in winter. My light flickers between heartbeats, and in those dark pulses, the rust patterns shift. They whisper things I used to know, scraping like metal across bone. The sound carries memories of teeth grinding in sleep, of nails on radiators, of screams muffled by pillows. Level 5. Absolute darkness. Not the kind that yields to light, but the kind that swallows illumination whole. Movement becomes memory. I know I'm descending only by the impact of each step, each thought pulling me deeper. Something warm and slick drips from above, cleaning perfect circles in my rust-stained skin. That's when I hear it. A sound like grinding metal, but wet, organic. My beam catches something, a patch of floor that absorbs rust rather than wears it. Clean, new, raw like exposed nerves, like skin after a scab tears free. It pulses with my pulse, growing with each beat. I should have turned back. Level 6. My light dies. But that clean spot glows with the pale luminescence of fish in deep water. It spreads like inverse rust, anti-decay, like something buried trying to escape. The grinding grows louder, resonating not from the walls, but from inside my skull. As if something's corroding my thoughts, one by one. Each memory dissolves into static that smells like ozone and tastes like fear. I never reach level 7. Instead, I find myself at the beginning again, staring into a sheet of polished steel on the wall. In my reflection, frozen like a photograph, my face mid-screen, skin beginning to oxidize. We went on a family trip to a small village. Just me, my older brother, and our parents. On the second day of the vacation, while I was walking the streets with my brother, I noticed a hill and a lonely, big building on top of it. It looked old and abandoned. "What's that?" I asked. "Oh, you haven't heard the stories?" He smiled. "It was a library called Afterlife a few hundred years ago. It's empty now, and people say there are ghosts in it. The legend says that if you go inside that library, you never return." "Yeah, sure. So, you want to check it out?" "Hell no. It looks old as fuck. It may collapse at any time." Okay. I rolled my eyes. I loved ghost stories and scary locations, so I decided to visit this library in the evening. When I arrived a few hours later, I slowly opened the huge wooden doors. They were heavy and made a loud noise, but luckily, nobody was nearby. As I walked deeper and deeper inside, I saw lights in the corridors. What the hell? I walked inside a colossal room, and to my surprise, it was full of people. It wasn't abandoned at all. A woman approached me. "Excuse me, do you know where's the exit?" she asked. She looked panicked for some reason. "Yeah, there." I pointed behind my back. "I've already tried that way. Doesn't matter," she whispered as she went away. The whole place seemed like some kind of cosplay party. Everyone was dressed up as people from older eras. There was a guy in colonial clothes. People were cosplaying as Mongolian warriors. And my favorite one was the guy in ancient Roman armor. He even talked to me. "Non debes huk bineri," he said. I had no idea what that meant, so I just smiled at him. I explored more and more rooms, and it was strange. Every room seemed the same. It became repetitive after a while, and I wondered how the hell could so many huge rooms with dozens of people fit into this building. Soon, I became bored and wanted to go home. But every door I opened led to another, same looking room. Or maybe it was the same room. Maybe there's just one room and I couldn't leave it. What kind of fucking witchery is this? I spent hours trying every door. I felt like I spent days, years, maybe even centuries trying to find an exit. Holy hell, I'm so stupid. I thought to myself, I can just ask someone. I saw a guy who was in futuristic clothes, a mechanical arm, and maybe cyber implants? "Excuse me," I said to him. "Do you know where's the exit?" "Yeah, there." He pointed at a door behind his back. But I already went through that door an infinite amount of times, and it led to the same fucking room. I've already tried that way. Doesn't matter, I said, and walked away. The Grimstone family is cursed. A long time ago, when the Milners and the Grimstones established the town of Root Hollow, a rivalry began between the two families. The two family heads ended their bickering by having a gun duel. In just 20 paces, it would be over. They both counted, matching their steps. 5 paces, 10 paces, 15 paces. A loud bang resounded through the empty forest space they had chosen to have their duel. No witnesses, just Abel Grimstone and the now dead Lou Milner. Abel's hand shook as he put his gun away into the pocket of his jacket, walking over to see if Lou was still alive. He saw the wide-eyed expression on his face. Abel had shot Lou dead without finishing all 20 paces. As blood began to pool under the body, Abel grabbed Lou by his ankles and started dragging him into the woods to bury him in an unmarked grave. He left Lou there and made his way home. When he returned to Root Hollow alone, causing an uproar in the Milner household, who had to admit defeat with Lou missing. The rightful mayor of the town would be Abel. That night, as the Grimstone family went to bed, Abel tossed and turned. He felt like someone was watching him from the room's far corner. The shape and size of this tall figure were undeniably the ghost of Lou Milner. Lou looked at him, blood dripping from the wound on his head. He was talking, but Abel couldn't hear what he was saying. The Grimstone family head knew what he was saying without words. "You killed me." A chill went down his spine, and he turned over, facing his sleeping wife. Abel closed his eyes, trying to make himself go back to sleep. If he ignored it, Lou's ghost would go away. Wouldn't it? Drew looked at his grandfather from across the dinner table, who flipped through the pages of his newspaper as he told this story. "You're joking. The Grimstone family can't be cursed." His grandfather lowered his paper. "Boy, do I look like I'm joking?" he said, the skin under his eyes permanently dark from lack of sleep. Drew shook his head. "No, sir." Charlie leaned back in his chair, addressing his grandson sternly. "It won't be long until you see him too. What our ancestor Abel did to Lou Milner was cruel. All because he wanted to be the leader of Root Hollow. It's why Abel's son moved the Grimstones out of that place, trying to escape it when he grew up. He should have known, though, that the curse would keep following." "Has anyone tried breaking the curse?" Charlie folded his newspaper and put it aside, fiddling with his wedding ring. "Only once. My father traveled in search of the town of Root Hollow." He tapped his finger on the table. "There wasn't a town anymore. Just empty, abandoned buildings. And something else." Curious, Drew fixed his posture and looked at his grandfather curiously. "What else was there?" His grandfather exhaled, saying, "A memorial statue of Lou Milner." "So then someone found Lou?" Charlie nodded. His brother, Shaw Milner, knew something was up when Abel returned to Root Hollow alone. So, the year Abel passed away, he went looking for where the duel took place. Drew paled. "So it means that Shaw found the body of his brother Lou and brought it back to Root Hollow, getting the statue built and burying the remains under it," he thought to himself. It would explain why the curse was able to follow after Abel's son, even though he had moved the Grimstones to another town. Drew knew that soon after his grandfather and father were gone, he would be haunted by the ghost of Lou Milner. Is there really no way to put an end to this? His grandfather looked towards the window, lost in thought. There might be, but I think it would be a shot in the dark. Whatever the suggestion was, Drew was willing to give it a try. Go to Root Hollow and burn the bones of Lou Milner. If the solution was so simple, why hadn't his great-grandfather dug up the bones and burned them then? Is there a reason why great-grandfather didn't burn the remains when he was there? He questioned his grandfather, who turned back to look at Drew. He was already seeing Lou's ghost, and since you haven't seen him yet, you might have a good chance at breaking this curse for good. Drew nodded and got the location for Root Hollow, making plans to travel. When he arrived at the ruins of Root Hollow, the entire place made his blood run cold. It was as if he could sense the lingering resentment that still hung onto this place. In the center was a tall, broken, and weathered statue, which he assumed was in memory of Lou Milner. Taking out a camping shovel from his travel pack, he began digging. Drew's shovel finally hit something hard. He knelt down, unearthing the rest with his hands. He found a tightly bound bundle wrapped in old sheet. Pulling it up from the hole, Drew untied it and looked at the contents inside. Inside was a fabric stained with patches of grime, frayed and weathered. Amidst the dirt-clung fabric were green and gray, brittle bones that were once ivory. Drew picked it up, put it in a large pot, and placed it inside, pouring flammable liquid onto the bundle. He lit a few matches and tossed them inside. Once it was done burning, he destroyed what he couldn't burn with. He hoped this would end the curse for his and the family's sake. As Drew left, he couldn't sense the lingering feeling he had once felt. Breathing out a sigh of relief, he got into his car and headed home. When Drew arrived home, he was greeted by his grandfather and father. "Welcome back." He exited his car and approached the two. Hopefully it went well. Have you seen Lou?" The two shook their heads. "That's good. That means that burning the remains worked." Was the curse that haunted the Grimstones finally over? Drew was able to do something that his own great-grandfather was not able to do. As he was settling down for bed, there was a knock at his apartment door. A nagging feeling told him not to answer it, but his curiosity made him check it out. Looking through the peephole, Drew saw nothing out of the ordinary, nor did he see anyone. He slowly opened the door and saw a card on his welcome mat. Leaning down, Drew picked it up. The 8 of Swords. Drew swallowed the lump and looked around for who was responsible. Right behind him, he could feel something hovering over him, but he didn't dare turn around. You can't escape, Grimstone. A clawed hand placed itself on his shoulder, gripping it inhumanely tight. Not until every last one of you is dead. Drew was yanked inside, and the door slammed shut, muffling his terrifying screams behind it. Close by, a young woman peered around the corner with a satisfied smile. They may have ended Lou Milner's ghost, but the Milner family would continue wiping out the Grimstones in his place, even if they had to make deals with demons to aid them. The Grimstone family will always be cursed. There once was a town at the base of Goodman's Mountain. A simple community of farmers, ranchers, and general merchandisers. And in this town, at the base of Goodman's Mountain, were 2 young lovers. The man loved the woman as much as the woman loved the man. Hand in hand, they would always be seen touring the fields, walking the valleys, and watching the sun sink down from the summit peak of Goodman's Mountain. Looking west, dreaming of the dreams that both of them dreamed. No one in the town at the base of Goodman's Mountain ever even tried to challenge the love that the 2 had for one another. It was pure and it was beautiful, like a romance story come to life. Until Jonathan Quinn arrived, a drunk from Missouri, a failed gambler of the Mississippi, and a wanted crook in Louisiana. Jonathan Quinn escaped quietly to the town at the base of Goodman's Mountain. Almost immediately, he yearned for the affection of the young woman who was always seen hand in hand with her lover in the fields, valleys, and at the summit of Goodman's Mountain. But steadfast in her heart for the young man who had captured her love, the young woman never catered to the desperate rogue named Jonathan Quinn. Finally, the day came when the young man asked the young woman for her hand in marriage, and she said yes. As Jonathan Quinn looked on in a silent rage, the town at the base of Goodman's Mountain rejoiced at the news. Church bells tolled,
Crowds of people cheered, and some say that even the coyotes howled in harmonic happiness on the summit of Goodman's Mountain that very night. The day of the wedding came. There was a spring near the town at the base of Goodman's Mountain, where the water was always clear and cool. It was summertime, a hot, gorgeous June day, when the two young lovers decided to say their vows at the shoreline of the crystal clear, majestically beautiful pool. The whole community gathered for the ceremony with watermelons, fiddles, and gifts. Smiles were a common expression, laughter a marvelous sound. And Jonathan Quinn angrily frowned. He got drunk off whiskey as the two lovers took their vows, with the whole community of the town at the base of Goodman's Mountain. With the whole community of the town at the base of Goodman's Mountain were gathered around. He danced a drunken dance as the music rang loud at the table of the bride and groom. He presented a toast to which he wished to make amends with the young man he had lost the young woman to. When the new husband stepped to connect his own glass to that of Jonathan Quinn's, the sharpened tip of a dagger tore deeply into his stomach. Before anyone could know what had just happened, Jonathan Quinn raced off into the deep forests. The whole town at the base of Goodman's Mountain watched in horror as the young bride cried, and a flood of red crimson clouded that majestically clear, beautiful pool. At the looming peak, the young groom was forever placed, facing west as his young wife cried upon his grave. Church bells tolled dully. Crowds of people wept and mourned, and some say that even the coyotes howled a deep, dreaded dirge about his tomb. For days, vigilantes scoured the base of Goodman's Mountain for that murdering rogue, Jonathan Quinn. But the killer had made a clean escape. The young widow walked the fields and valleys alone. Every day at sunset, she would be seen on the summit of Goodman's Mountain, watching the daylight fade, muttering about dreams that she no longer dreamed. At night, she would come home, and all the people of the town at the base of Goodman's Mountain listened to her weep. One crisp autumn day, as the leaves were falling, the young widow suddenly came home with a smile as crazed as a lunatic's. Everyone in the town at the base of Goodman's Mountain wondered what on earth could be going on. She raced straight to her parents' door telling them that the ghost of her young lover had told her that Jonathan Quinn would soon be found. He wanted her to tell everyone, even the preacher, to be ready with a noose to send Jonathan Quinn's soul to hell. Everyone at the town at the base of Goodman's Mountain thought the young widow had gone mad. But early next morning, rising over the treetops of the forest, a billowing gray column of smoke gradually rose. All alarms were raised, and everyone went to combat a raging blaze. All but the young woman who stayed in her bed that day after talking about the handsome spirit of her dead husband all night. When the woman's father finally returned, coated in soot and ash, he saw someone trying to get into his young widowed daughter's room with a knife in hand. Her father came around a bend, and there stood the devil, and there stood that devil, Jonathan Quinn. Jonathan Quinn tried to run away, but a quick bullet to his leg dashed all those hopes away. He called upon the mercy of all the people in the town at the base of Goodman's Mountain. But even the preacher closed the Bible and said there was nothing within it that could do Jonathan Quinn any good. He was hanged from a changing tree, which lost some of its leaves as the rope dropped hard from one of its firm branches. The town at the base of Goodman's Mountain watched him die and listened to the crazed laughter of the young woman as it occurred. That very night, with the full pale moon shimmering overhead, the young woman walked through the empty street of the town at the base of Goodman's Mountain and to the spring where her husband had died. They found her floating lifeless the next morning and buried her at the summit facing west beside her husband. The town at the base of Goodman's Mountain is no longer there. Some say the spring can still be found, but is much smaller than what it was. Yet to this day, at the summit peak, 2 windswept mounds of shoveled earth can still be seen. Many that know the story say that when the sun sinks in the west, 2 figures embrace in the fading twilight. They vanish with the close of the day, no longer having to dream about the dreams that sadly slipped away. Piper was born into a family of detectives. When each member of the Starling family comes of age, coordinates appear on their wrists, leading them to their first case. It seemed unusual to Piper until she turned 16 and numbers directing her to Gibraltar Point Lighthouse appeared. She knew the story behind this lighthouse. Its first keeper, John Paul Radelmuller, had been murdered there in 1815 by local soldiers. As to why he had been murdered, there were two versions. One says John sold the soldiers diluted liquor, and when they found out they had been cheated, they went back for revenge. Another tells that he was serving the soldiers at his home, and when he decided to close the shop early, a deadly fight ensued. Nothing was concrete on how he met his true end, though it would make for one hell of a ghost story if it were haunted. Piper knew the murder from the 1800s wouldn't be what she was meant to solve. She hoped so, at least. That morning, she packed her hiking gear, got into her 1972 AMC Gremlin, and headed towards her destination. As for the curse, or gift, of the starlings, Piper wasn't sure when it started, or why. Those who would know the answer aren't around anymore. Piper started out at the vast stretch of road ahead of her, listening to classic hits on the radio. Piper drummed her fingers on the steering wheel, then flicked the switch to turn right and onto a dirt road. Ahead of her was the lighthouse. She gazed at the looming building ahead of her. Piper felt the heavy weight of the situation heavily on her shoulders. Finding a safe place to park the car, Piper got out, grabbed her bag, and locked the car. She trudged up the path. It was overgrown, except for a few manicured hedges lining the way, winding up to the top. Here it was, Gibraltar Point Lighthouse. She was sure that in its heyday, this lighthouse was a remarkable sight. Now, it was no longer operational. Piper took a deep breath and exhaled, her eyes scanning over her surroundings. She needed to set up camp. So, Piper pushed open the heavy wooden door of the lighthouse and entered inside. It had been well preserved inside, showing it was well taken care of. Piper found a spot on the second floor and set up her pop-up tent. From here, she would be able to access the telescope to view what was all around her. Piper sat everything up and began her ascent up the stairs. On the balcony was a rusty telescope hanging on for dear life. Well, at least the lenses aren't broken, she thought to herself, lifting its neck and peering into it. Moving it around, Piper spotted something out of place. Someone had dug a trench in the back of the lighthouse. Curious, she grabbed a flashlight and headed outside. Her boots crunched on dead leaves underfoot as she made her way towards the trench. There, at the bottom of it, was a pile of bodies. all in various stages of decomposition. This was a serial killer's dumping ground. Piper needed to call the police. Reaching for her phone, she paused, hearing something being dragged along the ground. Turning off her flashlight, she hid behind an old oak tree. The source of the dragging came from an individual who was dragging a tightly wrapped body. Stopping at the edge of the trench, they used their foot to kick the heavy bundle into the trench. It bounced off one of the many others that were already lying at the bottom. A sickening squish and crunch echoed out of the hole. This had to be who was dumping bodies into the trench. Taking out a compact mirror Piper kept in her back pocket to fix her makeup, Piper angled the mirror so she could see the bank above the trench. Someone dressed in all black and a mask covering their face stood there, staring down into the trench before turning on their heel and walking away. It was at a time like this that Piper wished she had brought a proper weapon. The use of pepper spray and taser could give her time to run away, but not stun them long enough for authorities to arrive. Since she would be out here for a while, Piper needed to hatch a plan to immobilize this serial killer and have the police stationed close by to make the arrest. Her gut feeling told her that this was her first case. Something Piper would have to solve herself. Not hearing any more movement, she made her way back to the lighthouse and shut the door behind her. Tossing and turning in her sleeping bag, Piper stared up at the ceiling of her tent. She couldn't sleep. It was understandable. After all, there was a hole with dead bodies in the backyard of the lighthouse. Who could sleep with something like that in their backyard? Sitting up, Piper rubbed her face and yawned, crawling out of the tent. It's time for some coffee, since she won't be getting any sleep tonight. Waiting for the kettle to heat up on a mini gas stove, Piper shoveled a few spoonfuls of instant coffee and powdered creamer into a mug. When it whistled, she took it off and poured the water into her cup, flipping the off switch. Stirring the mixture, Piper blew on the steaming liquid before taking a sip. She walked up to one of the windows, gazing out of it. Down below, she saw an old trail leading somewhere out of sight. If Piper had to guess, it led to an old shed that stored tools, supplies, and firewood. A knock on the front door of the lighthouse startled her. Her heart jumped into her throat as she shakily put the coffee mug in her hands. As she shakily put down the coffee mug in her hands. Piper slowly walked over to a bag and took out her taser, slowly descending the stairs. She hid the device behind her back slowly opening the door for a crack. Outside was a young man who was close to her age. He was dressed like he had just jumped out of an 80s grunge magazine. Scrunching her nose at his taste in clothing, Piper questioned him about what he was doing there. He simply replied that he had seen a light while following a trail close by. In other words, he was nosy as to who was there. Could this be the person who Piper witnessed dumping a body earlier? And just how many of those kills were his? He gripped the door, trying to pry it out of Piper's grasp, so she put her foot and weight against the door. Again, she questioned what he was doing there. His eyes darkened, and in a faint voice, he responded to her that he knew she had seen him. Seen what exactly? Piper played dumb, but she knew better. She just hoped that this individual would believe her. Loosening his grip on the door, he let go of it and stepped back. He watched Piper closely, hands in his pockets, his eyes dark and void of any emotion. He turned on his heel and walked down one of the trails next to the lighthouse. Sandy knew that he wasn't really gone, and that he was going around to the back. She would have to get there before he would. If Piper didn't, she was sure that he would break down the door. Somehow, she felt that this young man knew that Piper saw what he had been doing and was going to silence her. Quickly shuffling down the stairs, her heart hammered in her chest just as the back door burst open. Piper cursed under her breath. Where could she go from here? She had to think fast before he closed in on her. As the young man stepped into the lighthouse, Piper went right into the living room. Heavy, thudding footsteps followed behind her, getting close enough to grab her. He reached out to grab Piper when she remembered the taser in her pocket. Turning her body, she flipped the switch on. Aiming it at the young man, she pressed the button, jamming it under his ribs. The sound of crackling filled the air, and just as he was about to wrap his hands around her neck, his body jolted and shook, bringing him to his knees. Piper didn't pull the taser away, not until she knew he wouldn't be able to get up. Once he was down on the floor, she ran out the door, making a beeline for her car. Piper fumbled with the keys of the car and managed to open it, getting inside. Limping out of the house, the young man's arm was across his ribs as she started the engine and backed out of the driveway. Her foot accelerated on the gas, and she watched him using her rear view mirror. Speeding out of the driveway like a bat out of hell, Piper fixed her eyes back on the road, knuckles white from her grip on the steering wheel. She needed to put distance between them until she got a few miles away to call the police and her family. Piper never realized a second figure in the back seat of her car, forgetting the most crucial rule she had been taught, that serial killers don't always work alone. A travel guide for the lost, the curious, and the irrevocably damned. Along the shore, the cloud waves break. The twin suns sink behind the lake. The shadows lengthen in Carcosa. Casilda's Song, Act 1, Scene 2. Have you seen the yellow sign? Common greeting among the masked. Orientation and arrival. So, you found it. The yellow sign on a subway wall. On the inside of your lover's wrist. In the coffee stain that wouldn't scrub out. You followed it in dreams. Through the train stations that no longer exist. Into alleys that were never built. And now, here you are. Welcome! Carcosa is not on any map. Time runs strangely here. Years pass in seconds. Hours stretch like skin. The moment you step into Carcosa, you've always been here. It will feel familiar in ways that unsettle the soul. Most arrivals forget how they arrived. That's good. Arrival is best forgotten. Local customs. The mask is mandatory. You may find yourself wearing one. You won't remember putting it on. That's fine. Removing it is discouraged. Removing someone else's is impossible. Silence is sacred. Names are dangerous. So are questions. If you hear your name whispered by a stranger, keep walking. If they speak your true name, run. Do not speak of the king lightly. He is not a metaphor. He is not a man. His court is everywhere and nowhere. If he looks at you, look down. If he speaks, listen, and do not ever interrupt. Notable attractions. The shores of Lake Hali. Black glass water that doesn't ripple. You may glimpse your past lives in its surface, or futures that do not belong to you. Many visitors walk into the lake, smiling. No one returns the same. The ruined observatory, where time was once studied and bled. The stars here whisper, and the equipment still ticks, though no one winds it. Many clocks are frozen at 10:14. No one remembers why. The endless stare. Carved from a single piece of bone, the stair descends forever. Some say you'll meet yourself halfway down. Others say you'll meet the king. No one agrees on which is worse.
The theater without walls.
Performances begin before you arrive and end after you forget. You may find yourself among the cast, wearing a mask, speaking lines you don't know until you say them. Sometimes the script changes mid-scene.
The library unfolding.
Books with living pages, letters that rearrange themselves when unobserved. One book is bound in your own skin. You'll know which one. You'll still open it, despite the screaming.
The hollow market.
Located behind the city's dreaming district, time is the only currency. Traded in years, memories, and promises you haven't made yet. Careful what you purchase. You may have already sold it. Frequent encounters.
The mirror men.
You may notice people whose faces never reflect. They speak backward. Their mouths don't move. If you stare too long, your reflection may begin to follow them instead.
The masked child.
Stands outside your lodging each morning. Never speaks. Hands you a flower made of black glass. Take it. The one time someone refused. The sun didn't rise.
The man beneath the lake.
If you whisper the right word to the water, he'll whisper back. If you listen too long, he'll offer you a place in the silt. A throne made of bones that remember pain.
The caretakers.
Tall, slow, faceless, often seen sweeping fog from the streets. Do not offer them help. They are tending to the madness, so it doesn't spread too quickly. The play. Eventually, you will find it, or it will find you. The king in yellow, bound in leather that smells of thunder and guilt. Most copies are incomplete, torn, or bloodstained. You will read it anyway. Act 1 teaches longing. Act 2 teaches madness. Act 3 cannot be unread.
The king in yellow.
He is always watching. He is always near. Some say he wears no mask. Others say he wears the first mask. And all others are merely echoes. He is tall, robed in tattered gold. His eyes are sunken stars. His crown is crooked and alive. He does not walk. He arrives. The sound of his voice can unravel entire thoughts. His shadow bends the street beneath your feet. Do not ask his name. You already know it. You just don't remember yet. If he offers you the play, accept it. Declining is impolite. Reading it is inevitable.
The yellow sign.
You will see it once, twice, endlessly, burned into curtains, pressed into tree bark, etched behind your eyes. Its meaning changes depending on who sees it. For some, it is an invitation. For others, a warning. It is never just a symbol. It is always watching. Lodging and sleep. Sleep when you can, but never where you last awoke. If the bed feels too warm, someone else was there first. If you find a note in your handwriting by the pillow, don't read it. Burn it. You'll know why later. There are no inns in Carcosia. You may wake in a bed of rotting silk embroidered with your birth date and your final words. The room around you may be familiar. It may not have a ceiling. It may be watching. Food is rarely needed here. If you grow hungry, something will be prepared. If it knows your name, do not eat it. Dreams are not private. The city listens. The king collects. Climate. The weather in Carcosia is eternal dusk. The rain tastes like memory and leaves stains that resemble letters in forgotten alphabets. The twin suns hang low and bloated, never rising, never quite setting. The air smells like pages long burned. Bring nothing. The city already knows your temperature. On leaving, you won't. Some say those who do carry Carcosia inside them. They wake with sand in their shoes and yellow dust on their windowsills. They hum tunes they've never heard. Some paint the yellow sign without knowing why. Some write the second act. Some bring others back. You may leave the city, but the mask doesn't leave you. There is no departure. There is only forgetting or serving. Advisory. If you feel yourself forgetting things, names, places, who you used to be, don't be afraid. That's just Carcosia making room. Notes from the Unbound Guide, page 2. A continuation of the Carcosian Codex, compiled by those who remember. Geography that remembers you. Carcosia is not stable. Streets may shift based on your memories. Alleyways extend longer when you're alone. Buildings you once saw in dreams now stand, rotted and real, by the seaside. Those who attempt to map the city often find their drawings changing while they sleep. I walked east for 3 days. I returned to the same lamppost every night. Traveler's Journal, torn and scorched at the corners. Tips for traversal. Do not follow street signs. They lie for your benefit. The moon appears in the north. Do not look at it too long. If the same street appears more than twice, walk backward until it forgets you. Temporal anomalies and misplaced hours. Time in Carcosia is sentient. It may accelerate when you are close to truth, or pause when the king is near. Missing time. You may forget full days. Some return older. Some don't return. Layered time. You may encounter yourself. Speak kindly. You won't remember it later, but he will. Looped moments. If you hear a song for the third time in 1 hour, hum along. It's rude not to. Known factions and phenomena. The Pale Librarians. Tall figures draped in silence. They do not speak, only gesture. If they offer you a book, it is your duty to read it, even if it has no words, even if it is bound in something alive. The choir. Heard only at dusk, hundreds of voices humming a single, endless note. If you find yourself humming along, it is already too late. The White Lanterns. Street lamps fashioned from bone and gristle. Some say they only glow in the presence of regret. Others say they are watching. The Yellow Gentleman. Masked travelers in suits of desaturated gold. Friendly, curious, never blink, never stop smiling. If one offers you their hand, it's to lead you somewhere. Don't look back. On the second act. No one remembers reading the second act, and yet they all do. Pieces of it have surfaced, etched into cave walls, found stitched inside coats, sung by children who do not sleep. He has no mask now. She dances with broken ankles. The moon weeps oil for the queen. The second act does not change. You do. Those who finish reading it report the following. The smell of brine and burning pages. The inability to pronounce their own name. Unrelenting visions of the king's reflection. In puddles, windows, loved ones' eyes. Rules of the unspoken law. These are etched beneath the city. Some hear them in their dreams. 1. Do not eat the fish. 2. Never speak the queen's name. 3.
If the statue turns its head, close your eyes.
4,
Wear your mask when you cry.
5,
If you find the door with no keyhole, knock exactly once. If it opens, walk backward through.
6. Above all,
Do not mention the king unless he mentions you first. The king's mood.
scholars debate whether the king is aware of all who enter his domain. Those who have seen him say he wears melancholy like a robe. Those who have heard him say his voice is like a horn across fog, low, distant, grieving. If his attention lingers on you, the following may occur. Water stains on every book you own. Recurring dreams of puppets without strings. Words missing from your speech. Every mirror in your home turning slightly askew. If he smiles at you, do not describe it. Not even here.
Recent sightings and warnings.
The lake has risen. 3 walkways now submerged. Do not attempt to swim. There is something beneath it that does not recognize you yet. A new tower has appeared in the southern quarter. It was not built. It simply is. The masks are changing. Some have begun to move when unworn. Several visitors have vanished, but their masks remain, hovering inches above the cobblestone.
Final entries.
Carcosia was never a place. It's a contagion of the soul. I do not dream of home anymore. I dream of stage lights. I am always waiting in the wings. I found the yellow sign in my son's drawings. He says the man in the tower taught him. We do not live near a tower. The stars are not wrong. They are singing. I have no real updates for you all at this time. There's so many tapes to go through. However, here's the next tape in line that I wrote down. I'm sorry if some things don't make sense. The quality of the audio wasn't the best, but I tried. Radio show host. Another lovely night of music. And I hope you agree, dear listeners. Sadly, we have to end the program. But we do not need to end it immediately. We do have time for a little story at the end. This story comes from the state where this broadcast is from, Washington State.
This one came in the mail only last week. So, we apologize if it seems a bit hasty, or if the quality isn't that good. I have a good feeling about this one, listeners. I will stop talking now and introduce The Angry Forest Spirit, narrated by John Sampson. Dog Walker. I am not religious and don't believe in ghosts or anything like that. However, based on what I had experienced, I'm not too sure anymore. I've told the story in multiple forms at this point, but no one seems to believe me. My friends and my family have called me crazy. But if this radio show can get the word out, I can probably get someone to help me. This happened on September 4th, 2001, and today's date, October 8th, 2003. I take my dog out for midnight walks every day. He's a black Labrador pit bull mix, so he is not a small dog by any sense of the imagination. Hell, I'm not the smallest person either. So, I'm not too afraid to take walks out at night. Plus, I live in the suburbs, so it is literally the safest place to take a midnight walk. I'm not stupid. I always take a reflective jacket and a flashlight if it gets too dark. I used to walk my dog in a park where baseball and soccer fields are. There is a relatively small patch of forest right next to the fields. What I mean by relatively small is about 9, maybe 10 houses when going by the sidewalk. I honestly didn't pay attention. It has been a long time since I went there. Right, getting back on topic. It was a full moon. My dog, Clive, and I were taking our usual walk. It was a typical night, and I remembered no cars were out, which I thought was strange, but not too weird. I believe it was midnight, if I remember right. Nothing really happened. I just walked up the sidewalk towards the park. There are 2 paths. One wide path that's been maintained and covered in bark chips. Most people take that path during the day. The other path, which is closer, is much narrower. The bushes are less upkept on this path. There are still bark chips, but it feels more like you're on a forest trail. I like to go on hikes, but ever since I got a new job, I haven't been able to go up to the mountains as much as I used to. So this was the closest thing to it. Getting back on track again, we walked down the narrower path, and as soon as we took a step on the ground, it felt like someone was watching us, and they were angry. Clive started to growl at something in the forest. I shined my light at roughly where he was growling. I didn't really see anything besides the green foliage and the shadows that were clinging to them. A bit spooked, I decided to keep the light on for both of our sakes, and we went down the forest trail for the last time. The trail isn't that long. It's like 1, maybe 2 minutes if you're taking your time, which I normally do. A bad decision at the time. We walked down the trail, and the shadows seemed to hang on every plant, tree, and bark chip that I moved my light over. Clive was tense. Throughout our walking, the fur on his back was up. Despite his breed, he looked like he was ready to bite someone's throat. Clive was the sweetest dog you could have. Maybe a bit clumsy, but never aggressive. That's when I knew something was very wrong. I started to pick up my pace, but then I heard a deeper growl behind me and a sharp pain in my back. I do remember some things, but I do not know much about what happened. I do remember what I felt. I felt pain, numbness, fear, bliss, panic, happiness. But then I felt calm. Clive was aggressively barking and whining. I tried moving, but my legs wouldn't move. I wasn't lying on the ground. I was still standing. I felt my arm being tugged on by the leash. The creature was right behind me. I felt its breath on the back of my neck. I saw what I thought was its tail. It looked like it was made out of vines, trees, bark, dead flesh, or some sort of moss. I think I dropped the flashlight when its tail came into view, because where the light fell, I saw a massive figure. He was much larger than me, built like a bodybuilder, and had to be 7 feet tall. He was heavily scarred. I thought I saw his teeth, and they were sharpened. But most strangely, he had a bear pelt on his head. The tail was gone from my vision, and the hot breath was gone from my neck. The huge man shoved me away, and my legs suddenly had the energy to move. Clive took the hint and ran. My head was still foggy, so I didn't know where we were going. I didn't know if we were in the middle of the street or back in the forest, although I could still hear the creature and the man fighting all the while. Strangely enough, I thought I saw a man in a mask with a strange cane. Next thing I knew, I was home, because Clive was scratching at the front door. I unlocked it and went inside. I probably fell asleep on the floor because I was laying on my carpet when I woke up. I called the police and told them I've been mugged and stabbed in the back. They came with an ambulance and took my statement. I didn't tell them everything, because they would call me crazy if I did. Paramedics looked at my back, and aside from some swelling, it looked like a bee sting. A small one, apparently. They left, and later that day, I wanted to see if I could grab my flashlight. I didn't take Clive because he seemed pretty tired. When I got to the park, nothing seemed too out of the ordinary. But where I thought I was last night, I saw most of the trees knocked down. I took a closer look, and I thought there was blood on the branches. But it looked more like tree sap. It was too brown to be blood, and too red to be sap. I found my flashlight, but it was destroyed. I think one of them stepped on it. I told my parents, then my sisters, and my friend. And now I am here. Let's hope someone can help me. Radio show host. And that was The Angry Forest Spirit. I hope you enjoyed that story, and I do hope to see all of you next week for our broadcast. Stay scared and keep listening to happy music on The Cultist Den. I don't know why I'm writing this all down now. I mean, no one would believe me, and maybe no one will. But no matter how hard I try to rationalize away what happened, I know what I saw. It wasn't the first summer the four of us had spent together at the annual youth camp, about an hour from my house. I still remember their carefree faces, smiling, laughing. None of us knew this trip would be our last. As we arrived at the camp, we unloaded our bags from the car and headed towards our cabin. The sun was shining brightly, the birds were chirping, and the air was filled with the sound of our laughter. We settled into our cabin after orientation and looked forward to our activities for the week. We were all excited to be back together again. The first few days were filled with swimming, singing around a campfire, and exploring the nature trails. It was on the fourth night that things started to get strange. We were all sitting around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories. That's when we heard the rustling in the bushes. At first, we thought it was just an animal, but then we saw it. "What's that?" Jack asked, pointing behind me. I chuckled. "Hardy hard, dude. I'm not falling for it." "Nah, man, just look," he insisted. I rolled my eyes and slowly looked over my shoulder.
a pair of glowing eyes stared back at me from the undergrowth just beyond the firelight. My heart immediately started beating faster as whatever this thing was seemed to blink as it watched us in silence.
"Get back, kids! Behind me!"
Jim, the lead counselor at camp, stepped forward with some small pots we'd used to cook. As we all scurried to one side, he opened his jacket and started banging the pots together, shouting at our uninvited guest. We all watched breathlessly as the creature let out a blood-curdling screech and stood up on two legs, startled by the sudden movement. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was tall, with matted fur covering its entire body, and sharp claws that glinted in the firelight. Its eyes were piercing and seemed to glow with an otherworldly intensity. As Jim continued to bang the pots, the creature made a sudden move, charging at us with frightening speed. We all screamed and scattered, trying to get as far away from the creature as possible. I stumbled and fell, my ankle twisting painfully under me. I cried out in pain, trying to crawl away from the creature as it seized Jim, tearing into him mercilessly. I buried my head in the dirt, frozen in terror, trying to block out his dying screams, accented by the crunching, squelching sounds of his flesh being consumed live. I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst. But then, everything went silent. I opened my eyes slowly, expecting to see the creature standing over me, ready to strike. Instead, sunlight blinded me as soon as I raised my head, and I reflexively closed my eyes again. I squinted and raised my hand to my forehead, searching frantically for any sign of the creature. Not only was there no sign of it, nothing remained of my friends or Jim, save a small slick of blood and viscera on the ground where he'd been killed. I tried to stand, but my ankle gave out on me, and I fell back to the ground. Pain shot through the joint, and a sharp spasm shot up my leg. I closed my eyes and tried to focus, which was difficult since I was still coming down from the shock of what had just happened. I slowly stood up, fighting back a wave of nausea and pain. I stepped over to the mess that had once been the head counselor and gagged. With no idea of where to turn, I limped through the woods, following the winding trail that would eventually lead back towards the main cabins. I was about halfway there when I saw another counselor
coming up the trail. I broke down crying, my body racked with sharp spasms as I struggled to catch my breath. Seeing me in turn, Brandon broke into a run until he caught up with me. Jack! Derek! Oh my God! Where are you? I cried, nearly delirious. Jack! Where are you? Tell me you're okay, please. I sobbed, clinging to Brandon's shoulder as he knelt beside me.
Hey now. It's okay. I'm here. Everything's going to be alright,
he assured me.
What happened to you? Are you hurt?
He asked, looking me over. He saw my ankle and gasped.
Oh, wow. We need to get you to a doctor.
The monster. I rambled, done in by pain and exhaustion. Brandon pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911.
911, what's your emergency?
Asked the operator on the other end.
I need an ambulance. I have a friend who was attacked by a wild animal.
What kind of animal?
I'm not really sure. It was just some kind of big, fur-covered thing with teeth and claws.
All right. I'm sending someone right away. Where are you?
I'm at the campground off Highway 18. We're just off the main trail, west of the cabins.
Okay. The ambulance and police will be there as soon as possible. Stay with your friend.
Brandon hung up the phone and looked down at me.
The ambulance is on its way. We can't stay here. It's too dangerous. Let's get you back to the cabin so you can have something more comfortable to lie on.
He scooped me up and carried me the rest of the way to the cabin. I made it to the hospital eventually, and aside from a sprained ankle, shattered nerves, and some scrapes, I was alright. My friends weren't, though. They were never found. Not a single trace. I explained to everyone who would listen what I'd seen, but it didn't do any good. I was written off as a grief-stricken child whose mind had created what it wanted to see to make sense of my trauma. The camp was deserted immediately, and the police never did find the creature. To make matters worse, when they found Jim's body, the attack was blamed on a mountain lion found in the area. But I didn't buy it. I know what I saw, and it was no cougar. My parents tried to convince me that the trauma from seeing my friends murdered had left me with some kind of delusion. But they don't understand. I'm hoping that if I get this written down, maybe someone will finally believe me. I have to believe that the memory of what I saw that day will stop haunting me someday. My friends Jose, Luke, and I always search for new things. We invented challenges and explored every inch of our hometown. Not long ago, we discovered geocaching. The three of us downloaded this app on our phones and set out. Filling our backpack with miscellaneous junk to replace any treasures we found, we rode out on our bikes. We didn't find too much. A panda pencil hugger and a $2 bill were among our top finds. Soon, the app led us off the beaten path. In between our neighborhood and the next, there's a dead-end road that leads to a power plant surrounded by the woods. Through said woods, a dirt path lined by massive power lines. Should we be worried about, electrocution? I say as we pull up to the spot.
Nah, we're fine,
said Jose. We search and search. This geocache is nowhere to be found. I mean, we've scoured everywhere, except for the more dangerous spots.
Bro, it's not here. Somebody already got it,
said Luke.
Yeah, they must have forgotten to replace it,
Jose says. We call it quits, walking back up towards the road. The following day, our trio is hanging out as usual. Luke's little brother, Gary, comes to join us. This is unusual, because he's, a hermit. I don't believe he'd seen the sun last summer. This kid plays computer games from dusk till dawn. We tell him of yesterday's geocaching experience, and he wants to try it himself. We agree. We're still curious and excited. Gary rides on Luke's handlebars because he's small enough. We make it to the dead end. He's having a blast.
Hey, we didn't try searching the woods yet,
Jose says. On second thought, not a great idea. Our tire most certainly does not suit a venture into the woods. Thorns, bugs, more thorns. It's awful. We were wanting to give up, but something stops us. A lone white shed.
Whoa, what the heck? Why's that out here?
Jose says. Maybe it's for hunting deer or something? I say.
Here? By the power plant? We're not even that deep into the woods,
Luke points out. Good point. That is odd, I say.
Want to go see it?
Jose says, motioning in its direction.
No way, dude,
Luke says.
Are you crazy?
Let's go, I say, pointing towards the out-of-place building. Busted windows and black graffiti. Expecting the usual vulgar phrases and dick drawings, it's safe to say we were caught by surprise. Sure, it was graffiti all right, but it was different. One phrase.
What is this?
Jose blurted out. Follow the power, it read. The words were not too legible. A can of rusted black spray paint lay on the ground.
Maybe it leads to the geocache?
Jose said. You can't be serious, I replied. He shrugged. We looked at each other. This went on for minutes. We pondered what to do. Curiosity got the better of us. Outside of the gravel of the power plant, in between the woods, lay a vast trail lined by massive power lines. Hesitantly, we followed the trail. It stretched on forever. An endless plain running through the vast woods. I'm not sure how long we walked. Maybe hours. The sun was now beginning to set, and our parents were worried. All of us received non-stop calls and texts from them. We eventually silenced our phones. The trail stopped, and the woods began again, seemingly another dead end. Should we keep going? I asked.
Well, we followed the power lines, but I see nothing,
Jose said. I can't believe we're doing this. What are we going to tell our parents? I said.
I don't know, man. We made it this far. We might as well keep going,
Luke said. I nodded, and we stepped into the woods. It was dead quiet, only broken up by the crunching of leaves and snapping of twigs beneath our feet. We trudged onward, trying our best to be quiet. We didn't know what we'd find, much less what we were looking for. Curiosity is a powerful thing. We had grown uneasy, beginning to smell an indescribable stench. Something felt wrong. My stomach churned. Then we reached a clearing. We froze, for before us stood an inexplicable sight. A group standing in the clearing, adorned in coats made of dark brown fur. Their attire was the least of my concerns. Those faces, I can still picture them clearly. They were missing their eyes and mouths, yet they still had noses. It was as if God forgot to add those features when creating them.
What the fuck?
Jose whispered to me. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and my heart rate increased. We were not supposed to be here. Everything in me wanted to run, but I was petrified. I just stared ahead. Could they see me? I shuddered. And what were they doing here? Something else came out of the woods. A wolf or coyote. Only it was standing on its hind legs. In its grasp, a crude knife. It was something straight out of an archaeological dig. I'd seen nothing similar. Again,
my fight or flight response was leaning towards flight. But my body just did not respond. None of us said a word to one another. A lump formed in my throat. I anxiously expected what was going to happen. I could not look away. One by one, the wolf walked up to the faceless people and began carving. It took its knife and carved into their faces. Soon, what felt like an eternity later, each of the beings now had a face. Beady eyes and crooked mouths. They were even more terrifying than before. The wolf then strolled back into the woods, while those things just stood there. By now, I had seen enough. The others must have had the same thought. My curiosity left and was replaced by survival. Slowly, we tiptoed backwards through the woods, clenching our teeth, hoping they couldn't hear us. "I think they're looking at us," Jose whispered through chattering teeth. A shiver went over my whole body. He was right. I could feel those black eyes staring right at us. "Go, go!" I say in a scream whisper. We haul ass without looking back, disregarding the many thorns grabbing us. Just as we're exiting the woods into the power plant, a loud mechanical noise cuts through the trees. Its roar shakes us to our core. Luke even throws Gary onto his shoulders, grabbing our bikes as fast as possible. Slamming those kickstands, we pedal back to civilization. Those things chased us the entire way, stopping only as we exited the power plant. We walk with our bikes along the road, relieved that we escaped and no longer have anyone following us. The dim street lights illuminate our way. We take our phones off silent, bombarded with missed calls and texts from our family. "Oh God, they must be so worried," I say. We then hear a siren coming from a police car. The red and blue lights come zooming around the corner. "Our parents must have called the police. Guess we better go talk to them," Jose says. As we approach the vehicle, I felt everything will be alright. That is, until I see the officer. Similar to those forest creatures, he lacks eyes and a mouth. We run again, but the cop remains still. My friends and I make it home to our parents' relief. We're, of course, grounded for at least the next month. Later that night, I lay in bed, my eyes wide open. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake that feeling. I kept trying to reassure myself. They couldn't leave the woods, right? I mean, they stopped following us. So, as long as we didn't go back to the power plant, we'll be fine. Why did they stop chasing us? But what about the comp? I text Luke and Jose, checking if they're okay, and relaying my thoughts to them, hoping they have more answers than I. No response from either. I hear chiming dings of text tones. It's coming from outside my window. I peel back the blinds, peeking through them, my hands shaking. My friends on the other side stare, their eyes beady and animalistic, smiles jagged. I fear I soon will meet a similar fate. I've always been drawn to the cold, to the kind of isolation only the dead of winter can offer. There's something about the snow-blanketed silence that settles over the world that feels sacred. So, when I got the chance to stay in a remote cabin in northern Minnesota for a week, I jumped at it. The cabin belonged to a friend of my uncle's, a retired logger named Red. He was the kind of man who wore flannel like a second skin and could whittle a masterpiece out of a branch without breaking a sweat. Red gave me the key, warned me to keep the fire stoked, and offhandedly mentioned, "Watch yourself out there. These woods have a way of changing a man." I laughed it off. Everyone likes to make the wilderness sound more mysterious than it is. The first 3 days were perfect. I'd wake up to the glow of the sun filtering through the frost-coated windows, spend the day hiking the trails, and return to the warmth of the cabin by evening. The woods were alive with the sounds of nature, snow crunching beneath my boots, the distant howl of coyotes, the occasional rustle of something moving just out of sight. It wasn't until the fourth night that I noticed the silence. It crept in gradually. No birdsong in the morning, no distant howls at night. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the occasional creak of the cabin settling in the cold. I chalked it up to the weather, but by the 5th day, unease had settled in my chest like a stone. The trails I'd grown familiar with seemed different. Trees gnarled and twisted in ways I didn't remember. Paths that seemed to double back on themselves, leading me in circles. The air carried a strange scent, metallic and sharp. like rusted iron. It clung to me, making my nose sting and my stomach churn. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but the nagging feeling that I wasn't alone wouldn't let me shake it. That evening, I decided to stay close to the cabin. As the sun set, the world outside the frosted windows seemed darker than it should have been. The firelight flickered weakly, casting long, flickering shadows that danced across the walls. Around midnight, I heard the first sound, a distant, bone-deep crack, like a tree snapping in half. The noise made me jump, and I sat bolt upright, straining to listen. The wind had picked up, howling around the cabin. But there was something else, something buried beneath it. A low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate in my chest. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I ventured outside, hoping the light of day would chase away the unease that had gripped me. Instead, I found tracks in the snow. They weren't human, but they weren't quite animal either. Long, narrow impressions of clawed toes that dug deep into the frozen ground. The tracks circled the cabin. I told myself it was just a bear, a big one, maybe starving from hibernation. But the claw marks etched into the cabin's wooden door suggested something else entirely. They were too precise, too deliberate, as if whatever had made them wasn't just scratching. It was testing, searching. I spent the rest of the day barricading the door and windows, piling furniture against the walls, and keeping the fire roaring. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that nothing would happen. But by the time night fell, I was shaking. And then the screams started. They didn't sound human, high-pitched and wailing, the kind of sound that makes your teeth ache and your skin crawl. They came from deep in the woods, at first faint and distant, but growing louder, closer. I could feel it more than hear it, a thrumming vibration in the walls, in my chest. The fire crackled weakly, its light dimming as the shadows pressed in closer. Then came the scratching. It started at the front door, slow, deliberate, A soft scrape of claws against wood. My breath caught, and I pressed my back against the far wall, clutching the fireplace poker like it was some kind of talisman. The scratching moved, circling the cabin, growing louder as it dragged across the walls and windows. I saw it then, or at least I thought I did. A flash of movement in the dark. A tall, gaunt silhouette with limbs too long and joints that bent the wrong way. Its eyes glinted faintly, reflecting the dying firelight. And its teeth, God, its teeth were the color of old bone, jagged and yellowed. I froze. It stopped. Then it spoke. Hungry. It rasped, the word dragging out in an almost whimpering growl. I don't remember deciding to run, but I remember the panic, the surge of adrenaline that pushed me to fling the door open and sprint into the woods. The cold hit me like a wall, but I barely noticed. Behind me, the door slammed shut, the creature's guttural screech splitting the night. I ran blindly, snow crunching beneath my boots, branches clawing at my face and arms. The woods seemed endless, the trees twisting and warping as though alive, their shadows writhing like serpents in the moonlight. The thing followed, its movements erratic and jerky, the sound of its pursuit a cacophony of snapping branches and guttural snarls. I could feel its presence behind me, a suffocating weight that pressed against my back, driving me forward. I don't know how long I ran before I tripped, my foot catching on a root hidden beneath the snow. I hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind from my lungs. When I looked up, it was there. It stood at the edge of the clearing, its emaciated frame towering over me. Its eyes burned with a dull, sickly light, and its mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. It reached for me, its claws outstretched, and I swear I felt the cold radiating from its body, an unnatural, bone-deep chill that sapped the strength from my limbs. In that moment, I thought I was going to die. Desperation does strange things to a person. My hand closed around a jagged rock, and I hurled it with all the strength I could muster. The rock struck the creature's head with a sickening crack, and it recoiled, letting out a blood-curdling screech that made my vision blur. I didn't wait to see if it would recover. I scrambled to my feet and ran, my legs burning, my lungs seizing with every ragged breath. Somehow, I found my way back to the cabin. The creature didn't follow, or if it did, it stayed just out of sight, its presence lingering like a shadow at the edge of my vision. I barricaded myself inside and waited, clutching the fireplace poker like a lifeline. The dawn came slowly, the first rays of light cutting through the gloom and chasing away the lingering shadows. I stepped outside, half expecting to see it waiting for me. But the woods were silent again. Too silent. I left the cabin that morning, hiking back to the nearest road and flagging down a passing car. I didn't look back. For weeks after, I tried to convince myself it wasn't real. That the isolation, the cold, had made me imagine it all. But the scratches on the door, the tracks in the snow, and the lingering metallic scent on my clothes told a different story. I don't go into the woods anymore, not alone. But every now and then, when the nights grow long and the wind howls through the trees, I think about that thing, about the way it looked at me, not just with hunger, but with recognition. I've started dreaming about it too. The clearing, the screeches, the feeling of cold claws brushing against my skin. And every time I wake up, I feel that same pull I did back then. A whisper in the back of my mind telling me to go back, because something about it feels unfinished. And the hunger, it wasn't just its hunger, it's mine now too. I'm homeless and living out of my car, but not for the reasons you'd think. You see, I'm what you would call a stereotypical mama's boy. Never had any girlfriends, not many friends either. I was an only child who spent all my time clinging to my mother. I didn't have a dad, but my mom made up for it. When she wasn't working, she spent all of her time with me, taking me to the movies, playing video games together. She was my entire world, the only person I needed. Unfortunately for me, this piece would all come crashing down. In my early 20s, my mom started getting sick. I tried so hard to take care of her and prayed every single day. But things only got worse, and the cancer would quickly take her life. Now, without hope and all alone, I spiraled into a deep depression. House notes, bills, it all rested on my shoulders now. It was safe to say that I was a deer in the headlights. I had no social skills and no relatives who were willing to help. Before I knew it, I was living in a house with no lights or running water. I was in the worst situation of my life and ended up in a dark place. To keep from falling into drugs or something even worse, I had to leave. One day I packed up my car and didn't look back. I drove for what seemed like forever, seeing more of the world than I ever had before. I met all sorts of people during my travels. Some freaks, but others pretty cool. Literally everything was a new experience for someone who had been sheltered all of his life. But oddly enough, I didn't feel afraid at all. I did miss my dear mother, but there was a feeling of freedom with this new life. Until one day something happened that forced me to consider finding a more traditional home. The story I'm about to share is one that most probably won't believe, but I know what happened, and it will stick with me for the rest of my days. It all started around midnight on a lonely country road. There was nothing but cow fields and old barns as far as the eye could see. I was trying to make it to the next town before calling it a night. But I had been driving all day and was getting pretty tired. Seeing as how I didn't want to wreck my only home, I decided it was time to pull over. I parked on the outskirts of one of the large cow fields. It was a clear night with stars filling the sky, so I figured it would be nice to break out my tarp and enjoy the view. After setting up, I sat down and opened up a bag of chips. In moments like this, I always found myself thinking of my mother. I missed the times we shared together, which is why I had to leave. I didn't really know what life had in store, but there was no going back. I couldn't stomach having to live alone in that empty house. Over time, my eyes started to get heavy. I turned on my side, ready to get some shut-eye, hoping an angry farmer wouldn't greet me with a shotgun the next morning. As I did, the most peculiar thing happened. What seemed like a ball of fire or some sort of meteor whizzed by. Thinking it was a shooting star, I paid it no mind. I would attempt to nod off, but that proved impossible, as the nearby woods gave off an ominous orange glow. My first thought was that this could be a forest fire, but as I rose to my feet, a loud whirring sound filled the air, to the point that I started having strong headaches. I limped back to my car, writhing in pain, prepared to call for help. While trying to dig for my phone, I heard a strange thud from behind me. Sort of like footsteps from a very large person. I turned to see whom or what was behind me. That's when I saw it. A giant creature, about 7 or 8 feet tall in stature, crept towards me. It seemed to be in some sort of metallic suit, giving off the same glow from before. The being wore an astronaut-like helmet that hid its facial features. It tried reaching for me with a slender and wrinkled arm. I instantly screamed and locked myself inside my car. Tears started to swell as I feared for my life. Never before had I seen something so horrifying. It was obvious this being was not of our world. I grabbed a knife from my glove box and clutched it tightly. Not that it could stand up to a literal freaking monster. The next thing I knew, its bony 3-fingered hand was pressed against my window. I was certain that the being would have no trouble shattering the glass. Quickly, I crawled onto the back floorboard and started to pray. I just lost my mother a few months ago, and now a monster was trying to kill me. What did it want? And was my life seriously about to end here? All these things swirled through my mind until I heard a voice. One that came from within my own head, speaking in a very kind tone.
Do not fear, human, for I've come to you with an offer. Come with us and learn all there is. See sights that no other human could fathom. When you return, eternal knowledge will belong to you and you alone.
I understood the words clearly, but my fear overpowered everything else. Before giving the offer any thought, I yelled to the top of my lungs. No, just leave me alone. Go away. Following my outburst, everything went silent. Save for my nervous breathing, I tried so desperately to hide. It seemed like an eternity had passed, and I didn't hear anything. So, reluctantly, I peered from the window to check my surroundings. I was relieved to see that this horrifying entity was no longer there. I glanced to my left, then the right. It was really gone. Naturally, I rushed into my front seat and started the engine. Before pulling off, I saw a large glowing object rise up from the trees. It was cigar-shaped and gave off the same loud humming sound from earlier. Even though I was terrified, I found myself transfixed by this once-in-a-lifetime moment. Before I knew it, the craft shot up into the air faster than I could blink. Afterwards, I peeled out of the field and kept driving until I found civilization. This was truly a harrowing experience for me. One that truly changed my outlook. Never had I believed in supernatural or aliens, but my experience was all too real. I ended up keeping this story to myself for the longest. After all, a homeless guy who saw an alien probably wouldn't sound good. I ended up finding myself a job and an apartment, no longer interested in the nomadic lifestyle. Presently, I've even started dating a beautiful waitress. Even though my life is pretty normal, I still have strange moments. Every once in a while, whenever I'm alone, I feel as if I can still hear the creature calling out to me, telling me that they're still watching and haven't forgotten me. But for the sake of normalcy, I try to ignore it. I often wonder what would have happened if I went with them. Was it a trap to hurt me? Or would they have really shown me all these amazing things? I guess it doesn't matter now, but I'll never forget my close encounter on that dreary farmstead.